During this session, I'll be completing Chapter 3 of the book Transactionalism by Trevor J. Phillips. I'll be reading the sections on the transactional position today, Niels Bohr, Ludwig von Bertalanffy, Transactionalism, a recapitulation. The transactional position today. The contemporary transactional approach, the chief philosophical tenets of which will be summarized below, has permeated several disciplinary areas. The most obvious and well-publicized of these is psychology. It is the purpose of the following chapter to examine the influence of the transactional point of view on the traditional concepts of human nature. The present section will consider two research workers, one in the area of physics, the other biology, who have adopted or arrived at independently transactional approximations. Niels Bohr. This atomic physicist operates on the assumption that it is not possible to draw a distinction between observation of phenomena and the independent behavior of objects. That is to say, Bohr rejects the mechanical conception of nature as espoused and developed by Newtonian physicists. He affirms the impossibility of any sharp separation between the behavior of atomic objects and the interaction with the measuring instruments which serve to define the conditions under which phenomena appear. Bohr further maintained that evidence obtained under different experimental conditions cannot be fully understood or grasped within a single picture, but must be regarded as complementary. By this term, he implies that only the totality of the phenomena exhausts the possible information about the objects. The term also refers directly to the observer or experimenter inhabiting a domain of experience, where unambiguous application of the concepts used in the description of phenomena depends essentially on the conditions of observation. The basic tenet that Bohr's work illustrates, and one which very closely parallels that of transactionalism, is that the epistemological type of reality, the isolated and independent realm, cannot be countenanced. His stress on physical complementarity is his alternative. A final quotation will confirm his transactional orientation. It is indeed more appropriate to use the word phenomenon to refer only to observations obtained under circumstances whose description includes an account of the whole experimental arrangement. Ludwig von Bertalanffy. Biologist Bertalanffy is the pioneer of the general system theory, a theory that espouses the belief that there may be a unifying principle in the universe, suggesting organization on all levels. He is also an advocate of the theory of open systems as opposed to closed. The latter are systems in which the final state is unequivocally determined by initial conditions, as in the case of chemical equilibrium. Open systems, however, reach their final state from different initial conditions and in varying ways. Every living organism, for example, is basically an open system, maintaining itself in a continuous inflow and outflow, building up and breaking down of components, never being, so long as it is alive, in a state of chemical and thermodynamic equilibrium, but maintained in a so-called steady state, which is distant from the latter. What is being contrasted, in effect, is a system in which material neither enters nor leaves, and one in which there is a continuous flow of component material from outside, and growth is a dominant characteristic. The latter system could well be labeled transactional, indeed, as will be indicated in the final chapter of the study. A similarly described system has so been labeled. Bertalanffy himself contends that this theory of open systems may be applied to non-physical levels. In philosophy, for example, where there is a trend toward the transactional rather than toward the interactional or self-actional approaches, he sees a correspondence to the open system models. That is to say, each disciplinary area, the philosophical and the biological, looks to the other as an exponent of its particular theory, the transactional or the general systems. However, in the case of Bertalanffy, it may with justification be stated that as one who is determined through his theory to contemplate a wider system of organism plus environment than biologists have hitherto contemplated, his overall approach or point of view is definitely transactional. Transactionalism, a recapitulation. Expressed in the broadest terms, the transactional thesis, as here presented, states that the problems of men originate and are dealt with within a single world of experience. In doing so, it avoids the traditional philosophical dilemma that arises when twin realms of reality are posited, and the mind becomes ensnared with their reconciliation and interaction. How, it is asked, can an elemental and encapsulated mind know that a material world exists? The self-actional analysis, which assumes that certain entities have inherent capacities for activity, as well as the interactional, are discredited. Transactionalism warns against the dangers of trying to live one's life in terms of a latter-day orientation, against placing one's reliance upon Newtonian concepts which have, however, since the 17th century, been reinterpreted and modified. For example, the concept of social forces is Newtonian, and through a process of reification becomes operationally interactional. The basic transactional tenets may be summarized as follows. Potentiality is viewed as a characteristic of change that manifests itself in connection with dynamic interaction with new elements in the environment. The ontological reference is eliminated. Whatever professes to be knowledge must emerge from the actual context of inquiry. For transactionalists, this involves the conversion of the ontological argument into the logical. The historical systems of epistemology based on the ontological assumption that knowledge depends on the independent existence of a knower and of something to be known is rejected. Transactional observation or perception is unfractured observation, in which the knowing known is taken as a unified process. Knowing is a transaction between various aspects or foci of a natural world of events and becomes an insoluble problem only when it is arbitrarily broken into two or more unjoinable parts. No pre-knowledge of either organism or environment alone is adequate to describe the entire event. What is required is that they be accepted in common system with full freedom permitted for their developing examination. Human behavior is a transdermal affair. Intradermal and extradermal factors are to be viewed as aspects of the total behavioral event. Truth is a function of deliberately striven for consequences that arise out of inquiry. Ends are determinable only in terms of, or in the context of, the means employed in bringing them about. The fragmentation of experience is to be corrected on whatever level it may occur. This chapter, in which transactionalism in contemporary philosophy was examined, is concluded with a quotation by John Dewey. Not only is it pertinent to the preceding discussion, but it also serves to introduce the topic with which the following chapter will deal. From birth to death, every human being is a party, so that neither he nor anything done or suffered can possibly be understood when it is separated from the fact of participation in an extensive body of transactions, to which a given human being may contribute and which he modifies, but only in virtue of being a partaker in them. That concludes Chapter 3.